Hello, and thank you for joining today's webcast. We're about to begin Get Serious About Online Communities. I'm going to begin with a few points of housekeeping. By now, you should be in the event console. You should see the title slide for today's presentation, a Twitter stream and QA widget open. And you can tweet about this webcast during the presentation with the hashtag SeriousAboutSocial. Please also submit questions during the webcast through the Q&A widget. We'll be addressing those we can get to at the end of the presentation. Please also note there are additional resources available to you at the bottom of your screen, including our speaker bios, a way to download today's deck, more on Lithium and our products, and of course a way to contact us if you'd like to set up a meeting. With that, I would like to introduce today's speakers. With us today, we have Kathy Boffman, President and co-founder of ComBlu. Kathy is a social engagement and social business strategist with frequent appearances at South by Southwest, Social Media and Community Strategies Conference, and the Word of Mouth Marketing Association Summit. She's an adjunct professor for Georgetown University. She recently authored a second ebook on content supply chain and is the author of ComBlu's annual research report, State of Online Branded Communities, which we're going to dig into shortly. First, I'd like to introduce you to Joe Cothrell. For more than a decade, Joe has helped large organizations use social technologies to drive measurable business value. He's worked with more than 300 companies across a variety of industries, including telecom, computer hardware and software, retail, and consumer electronics. He's helped to plan and launch successful support initiatives for all of them. Joe is Lithium's Chief Community Officer, and he's going to kick off today's session. Good morning, Joe, and take it away.
Hey, thanks very much, Bonnie, and thanks to all of you who've joined us. Before we dive into Kathy's portion of the presentation, I thought I would just take a moment to talk a little bit about Lithium for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We power social customer experience for hundreds of companies around the world. We provide a platform for companies to host and manage communities on their domain, meaning on their website, and to manage social interactions off their website in channels like Facebook, Twitter, and third-party communities. This slide shows you a little bit of some of the customers we have, showing a little bit of a range of different industries, obviously consumer and B2B, high-tech, as well as, some brands that perhaps you might not expect to be active in social. Very interesting statistic there on the left-hand side, more than 100 million people use Lithium communities every single month. So if you combined all of the Lithium-powered communities, we're one of the top social networks in the world. Obviously, these are communities that are run by our customers, so you might not even know that you're using a Lithium community, but we're out there, and you probably used one of our communities in the last month. Named a leader by Forrester and Gartner, so there's a lot of research out there on how communities and large enterprises are run today, so encourage you to investigate some of those reports. And then we're a SaaS platform, so we power all of these interactions out of our own data centers, so it gives us a rich set of data for understanding what's happening in communities today. I'm going to tell a quick story to help sort of set a context for our session today. Before I focused on social and communities, I was a management consultant, and I worked for large professional services firms looking at business processes and advising companies on how to do them better. One year at one of the firms I was in, we brought Noel Tichy in to speak to our annual consultant meeting. So 400 or 500 consultants in a room, and Noel, who's a management guru, used to run Crotonville, which is GE's leadership development center, first corporate university in the world. And Noel started his session by asking some questions of the audience. And he said, don't Google this, but I'd just like to know, do any of you know the top five, the 5 largest companies in the world by revenue? So he threw this question out to hundreds of consultants. No one could name the top 5 companies by revenue in the world in order. So Noel said, well, okay. Can any of you tell me what the biggest company in the world is, what their revenue is for the last year? And he said, just to make it easier, If you get it within $10 billion, I will give you credit for that answer. Once again, nobody could answer this question. And Noel said, look, guys, you're management consultants, right? You've got to be geeks about this stuff. You've got to understand the world in which you work. You've got to understand the fundamentals. And likewise, I think if you're in social and community, if you are a practitioner, if you're creating or managing these programs for your company, you've got to be a geek about this stuff. And I think one of the ways you become a geek about this stuff is you look to companies that have spent time to really understand what's happening out there. I know there are 100,000 places you can learn on the web about what different companies are doing. But some companies are focusing on doing research every single year to identify the best. And I think that's what we're talking about today with Kathy Boffman and ComBlu. They've done this study for 4 years. Their list might be different than your list or my list. But I think it's important to understand who are the companies that people talk about when they talk about the best. And so Kathy's going to share some of that research, and obviously we encourage you to download that research as well. I mentioned that it's the 4th year. The title of the report is State of Online Branded Communities. It's used by many Lithium customers as one input into their benchmarking process. It's something we recommend that all of our customers do every year is say, how do we stand against the rest of these communities? How do we compare? What ideas can we gain from other companies? So this is a great source of insight to that. And lastly, I'd say, we're very pleased to see that Lithium customers have risen to the top of the list here. So every year we look, and certainly our customers look as well, and it's just fantastic to see companies like Verizon and Sony and EA, AT&T, and Cisco being recognized for the great work they do as shining stars in this study. Kathy is going to talk about the study for you and share some of the results, and then we're going to have a Q&A session. So don't forget to get some questions in, and we'll address those, and really looking forward to that conversation. And at this point, Kathy, I'll kick it over to you.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everybody. Before I get into some of the data and some of the examples, I'll also give you a little perspective on the study. We really look at community broadly as the overarching ecosystem of how brands engage with their constituents, with their broad stakeholders. But for the purpose of this study, we really focus on their branded online communities. And one of our major goals in doing this study is to really gather firsthand experience with how these communities engage and interact with their members. It's easy to build a community, but it's not easy to have a community thrive. So specifically, our research assesses the brand's effectiveness in providing a meaningful experience for members. So do they have a mission, and is how they're engaging within that community true to the mission that they're presenting? Do they integrate their brand strategies across multiple communities and social media? Most brands have more than one community. Many brands consider their social properties their communities. It's really all part of a community ecosystem. So it's interesting when there's a lack of cohesion across that ecosystem, and that's one of the things that we look at. And then are they applying best practices to strengthen customer engagement? One of the things that is an observation that as the social ecosystem evolves, we think brands are still grappling with the bright, shiny object syndrome. I'm not sure it's ever going to go away because we're so creatively prolific in offering new tools and new platforms as we go. But I think this leads to a lack of understanding of which channels bring a true return on engagement. Often brands simply default to like an all-social view of community, and they abandon or they ignore their branded online community structure. And for some, we think that that's actually an all-social approach is actually the right way to go, like an all-Facebook or all-Twitter ecosystem. But for others, that same approach basically truncates engagement and it prevents the formation of a deeper affinity, which is really what the hallmark is of a true branded online community. So we're going to delve into that a little bit more as we go. A couple of just demographics here. In this latest study, we looked at across 15 industries, representing 92 different brands or companies, and we joined 219 communities. And we look at this both qualitatively and quantitatively. And the quantitative look, we have a scorecard of 33 community best practices, and we have an analyst that joins the community and just gives us a yes or no, is that best practice present? And we have a lot of people stress test with that analyst as to whether or not they really scored it correctly. And then qualitatively, we capture what was that scorer's experience. We look at insights on how long did it take a brand to reach out after I registered. We look at, are the promises made in the community, are they actually kept? So we look at things like that, and those two things together form the scoring for the community. Where we really get into the qualitative look that I talked about in one area is to give each community an overall classification. Actually, it's each company or brand that we look at, because this classification is across their whole community or their engagement ecosystem. And we have 4 categories. Cohesive, which is the brand has messaging and engagement across the social ecosystem that is consistent but makes appropriate adjustments depending upon what the channel or the platform is. Experimentation, there's lots of action, but there doesn't seem to be any overarching organizational structure across the channels, or if it's a multi-brand situation, a house of brands, that there doesn't seem to be an adoption of best practice across their brands. And overall, you can say that the engagement here doesn't seem to be pivoting against any defined mission. It's just a lot of engagement that's going on out there. Overload is different from experimentation in that there's a lot of competing communities that seem to have the same mission, so you get gateway confusion where the members, the consumers, the customers don't really know where to go. And finally, it's ghost town, and ghost towns are practically non-existent anymore. When we first started this study 4 years ago, it was actually relatively high, but now we believe that people understand that this takes an investment, it takes attention, and that people aren't just throwing something up and hoping that people will come as a result. So here was the big observation this year from in looking at the overall classification. We believe that a natural part of the community maturation cycle is that brands start making adjustments based on member input and performance analytics. When brands first launched communities, their legacy knowledge in this space, in this discipline, was really non-existent. And experimentation was really rampant. You didn't really see any cohesion across these different platforms. And brands tried many things. There was no obvious strategy, and they really were searching for what their ultimate secret sauce was for their community structure. Now we think that brands they have a lot more experience. Measurement has become a lot more sophisticated, and they're using their findings and their learnings to jettison non-performing engagement approaches. They're purposely sunsetting non-performing assets, whereas before they would just let them sit up there and not do anything with them. And they're introducing new tools and engagement catalysts as they go. So now we're seeing that brands that before we were seeing a growth in the cohesion, it went down a little bit this year, and we saw this regrowth in experimentation. We think this is because as brands are learning, they're taking the learnings and they're doing experimentation again, but at a higher, more sophisticated level. And we think that in future years that we're now going to see a new growth of cohesion as we go forward. We thought that was a really interesting observation across this study. Joe mentioned the highest performers in the study. Here's a list of what we call our shining stars, and we give what we call a lumen rating here. The highest that you can score in the study is 65 points, and you can see that there's people that are starting to get up into the high 50s, and many of these brands in the high 50s here are in the 50s here are Lithium customers. So this year we had 15 brands that scored more than 50 points, and last year there were only 12. The first time ever one entire industry all scored 50 or more points, and that was the telecommunications industry. And if you look at these high performers, you'll see a lot of people in telecommunications, a lot of people in technology, and a lot of people in retail here. And we think those are the early adopters, and they have more experience. If you think about technology companies, they started years ago with communities, but they were called user groups. And then they went to, online boards and then to forums. They have a lot of experience and a lot of legacy knowledge, and they are fast adopters of new approaches to community, and I think that's why you see so many of them in the top performers. The next level down are bright lights. We have about 15 brands that scored here between 40 and 50, and these brands, some of them made big jumps since last year, and some of them are basically just like running in place, staying put there. And some of these brands were, in the past, were higher performers and now are down in this list. And part of that is because of the sunsetting of assets. Some of it is that their engagement moved more to social entities that didn't really have a community feel to them. They were more push models. So they weren't available for scoring, and their scores went down, not as a result of just them not being there, but there just wasn't as much engagement in how we would define true engagement. Aetna, which is not on either of these lists, but they're worth pointing out, they were our most improved brand, and they jumped 30 points in 1 year. So I like to say that they just started to take community more seriously. I've mentioned a couple of times, social platforms versus community. And this is something that we talk about all the time, and I talk about this with other people in this space. Basically, what we think is that your community should be a community without walls, and that there should be a cohesive community engagement roadmap across all of the nodes in your community ecosystem, whether those be your digital branded assets that have community functionality associated with them, or if it's shared media like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But people, I think, are lacking a comprehensive community and social assimilation. Actually, some of the integration of social went down this year, which was rather surprising to us. And as I mentioned earlier, many brands continue to define Facebook as their community, and they point to the number of fans or likes as an indicator of community success. Yet all of us on this call, I'm sure, have seen all of the studies that have concluded that likes are not equivalent to relationship with customer. And that's what the mission of your community is, your relationship with your customer. People go to Facebook and other social platforms for different reasons than they go to community. And it's inside of the community, you'll have fewer members. There'll more than likely be fewer people involved in your community, but they're more deeply involved. These are the people who tend to build an actual brand affinity. They want a relationship, and they're the defenders of the brand. People that tend to engage on Facebook and social channels, there's good reason for them. They're an appropriate place in the ecosystem, but it's much more of a transactional push model still than a true community is. And that, we think, is an important thing to keep our brains around and to watch. So I'm going to switch gears here. I've been talking a little bit about who were the great people and how we look at some of the best practices. I want to talk a little bit about what not to do when you're engaging. I'm just going to go over these quickly because I've got a lot to go over today. But the first one is when you moderate stories, comments, and photos before posting. We know that there's a lot of brands that their governance structure will not allow this, but we're hoping that this changes over time. It has changed for many brands that I like to say have more confidence that no matter what consumers or community members say, that other people in the community will either offer another point of view or that the brand is open to learning something from those comments. But we still see a lot of that, what I call over-moderation inside of the community structure. The other big no-no, as far as I'm concerned, is asking for information at registration and never doing anything with it. There's many communities that we saw this year. We were actually really excited because there was some personalization that was presented where brands would say, oh, give us this information, and then we're going to personalize the content that we're giving you inside the community. So we gave them all of this information and whatever, and we had multiple people do this, very different demographics, very different interests, whatever that they told them. Everybody got the same content. There was no personalization. And worse than that, the content rarely changed. So these are things that are going to be anti-motivators. Everybody in community management and community strategy is looking for return motivations. This is the exact opposite of a return motivator as you're looking at a community. The third one that I have up here of leaving up hopelessly outdated content, campaigns and conversations is also true of a worse practice. You need to take that down. It's indicative of a community that's not really current or alive. The next worst practice that we observed is displaying a what's new banner and never showing anything that's new. And worse, we saw a couple of different communities that showed, here's what's new, and all of the content said coming soon. So there wasn't even any net new content there, and we saw that a couple of different times. And then the final one here is asking members or consumers or customers to submit success stories and never giving people the criteria of how they're going to be selected, how are they rated, how are they ranked, and worse, never using any of them in any visible way within the community. That, again, gets people to think, okay, this community and this brand is disrespecting me. I have only so much bandwidth. I've given them this great success story, and they don't even tell me how it's going to be used, if it's going to be used. They don't even send me a thank you, which did occur more than once. The next thing that I want to talk about a little bit from the study is this is the opposite of what we just talked about. This is like delivering on your community mission. This is when you've got great engagement tactics going on. And I'm going to focus on the first one here, which is from Axe. And when they were introducing their first products for women, They went out into their community. It was a brilliant campaign, and they co-created with their community a graphic novel. And this graphic novel became the basis for the launch marketing materials, including television, advertising, marketing materials, the website, couponing, the whole bit. And it was brilliantly done, integrated across their whole community ecosystem. They had a website where you could read the whole graphic novel to date, but you could vote on storylines right on Facebook. If you registered for the community using Facebook and you submitted a great storyline for the graphic novel, they would pull your profile photo in, and you personally became one of the characters in the graphic novel. Talk about return motivators. This was really brilliant. They did some offline events in association with this, in addition to doing, as I say, using this as the basis for their whole launch campaign. It was a great engagement approach, and again, it used all of the nodes of the ecosystem. I've got a couple of other examples here. The NBC example, they provide a virtual backstage pass to NBC shows and properties, and it's a really good example of the multi-screen experience that we're starting to see across retail companies and entertainment companies. As you're thinking about community, you have to think about how many different screens, how many different devices, where people are going to be engaging, and figure out what is the appropriate engagement, not only for the different channels, but for the different screens that you're looking at. I'm just going to mention AT&T here. They do a hackathon every year, and a lot of the big tech companies do hackathons. But AT&T did a great job of integrating online and offline engagement. And if any of you follow the work of Keller Fay, which is a word-of-mouth research company that specializes in face-to-face word-of-mouth. They have a lot of research that shows that 80 to 90% of all word-of-mouth, depending upon the industry that you're in, still takes place face-to-face. But they also show that a lot of that face-to-face word-of-mouth is supported by the online environment. AT&T did a particularly great job of having this offline event that they used their online community for people to register, for voting for what some of the different events and what were they going to be hacking at the hackathon, things like that. They used the offline. Oh, and then they used the online to stream what was going on in the offline, and they used the offline to be supported by the online event. So it was a really good integration back and forth there between that. I'm going to switch now into some more of the data from the study. And this is a theme that I think Lithium talks about, and a lot of the other thought leaders in the industry really are focusing on right now. And this is, how do you make your community a trusted content and engagement hub? Content and engagement are so closely aligned. You almost can't have engagement without content, and if nobody's engaging around your content today, you might as well not have content. So as we look at community, we look very closely at what people are doing with content and what the content best practices are. So you'll have to download the study in order to read this. Don't you hate it when people say that to you? But I'm saying this to you. These are the 33 best practices. And we didn't really find a lot of significant change in best practice adoption in the 2012 study. The biggest jump that we saw was in user reviews, which went from 27% to 51%, and toolbars and custom widgets, which climbed from about 10% to 25, 26%, which still isn't high, but I liked that level of growth because tools, custom widgets and toolbars are an extremely important part of the community customization model, which is so important for return motivation. So user reviews, why is that important, and why did we call that out other than just that it grew? We think it's an indicator of a growing focus on the post-purchase channel in the decision journey. You really need the people, your advocates and your community members, to provide peer-to-peer stories and those reviews in order to move people from the consideration mode to the preference mode when they're traveling along the decision journey. And people say, oh, no, but I've got a lot of really great branded content that I'm using for preference mode. Well, that's all well and good, but that does not resonate with people when they're in the preference mode. What they really want is this peer-to-peer content. Your communities is where you can capture that. So looking at the use of these user reviews and the growth of that is really good, but it's still not as high as it should be, of course. And then the tools and the custom widgets, this really are tools for self-curation so that I, as a community member, can have a more meaningful experience. And some of the better community platforms like Lithium make it easy for users to capture content and information from across the cloud and organize it in folders and make it easy for people to use your community as their go-to place for a particular area of interest or something as a professional that they're working on. So we think, again, this is a trend worth watching as it gives easy access to content that matters on a member level, as well as creates that return motivation to the community. You can tell, probably picked up by now, that return motivation is one of my mantras. If you don't have that return motivation, you're just not going to get people to respond, and your community won't grow. Other best practices that improved, content best practices that improved were, more faceted search to make the navigation and finding content easier, the use of rating content and then exposing the most highly rated content as you're searching within the community, tagging, so allowing community members to add additional tags helps organize content and makes it more intuitive to the people that are actually involved in using the community. Content customization, and then having a personal dashboard. The personal dashboard is not just my performance inside the community, but it's all the things that I'm interested in. It gives me one gateway into the things that I'm interested in the community and makes it easy for me to find those again. So those are overarching best practices. When we talk about engagement, we always refer to the 3 pillars of engagement, which are support, advocacy, and feedback. So I'm going to just touch upon the best practices for each and then just show you very quickly some examples there. So if I look at the best practices for support, what is support? This is when a brand, typically a telecommunications brand, a technology brand, and others are starting to adopt this, where the peer-to-peer support model is being used within a community structure. So instead of a customer picking up the phone to a call center or using email support, I'm going to the community, and community members are answering the questions of other community members or customers of the brand. And this obviously deflects the overall cost of support for the brand. So what is very important here then is for me to be able to quickly find the forum or the place in the community that's going to deal with the product or the service that I'm having an issue or a challenge with, or that I want to learn how to better use that product or service. So content tagging is really important. So it helps organize the community by segment, problem, product, service. Rewards and recognition. If I don't recognize my highest performers in the community, they may or may not come back, but research shows that more than likely they're going to lose interest. I also want to be able to use that rewards and recognition to find those authors that have the most highly rated content, because I should be able to just go and search by author because, let's say, Joe communicates things in a way that's really easy for me to understand. So I want to find everything that Joe's contributed to this community. So, and an advocate program is also extremely important. You need to tap the people who are most passionate about your product and service. Our definition of advocates are the 6 to 8% of your customer base who know your products the best, who are your defenders, and who will teach and mentor others about your brand. And then finally, leaderboards are really important because they're a spotlight of what's going on in the community. So let's look at an example here. AT&T, again, is an example of a community that's doing a lot of things well. So if you look up in the upper right where you'll see the top kudoed posts, that's what I'm talking about here, where these posts were rated by other people in the community. So I can look for my most highly rated content here, and the most highly rated content becomes exposed as I'm looking for my answers. Right under there is the top kudoed authors. That's what I was referring to before. I want to find everything Joe wrote because, you know, he's so great at explaining things. Right underneath that, the news and the highlights portion, again, I'm calling out what's new in the community. Again, a high return motivator. If you're not showing me anything that's new, and if I don't easily see anything that's new, I may not come back here again because I think it's too static for my, for my needs. Over in the bottom left, we've got quick links. That leads to easy navigation. Navigation is very key. You're going to have a lot of people abort if they find it too difficult to use. And then the tech support chat. I want to get people to first use the community content, but I also need to make it easy for them to interact with one of my experts. So this is a community that has a ton of really great best practices embedded within it. Then we'll move on to the next pillar of engagement, which is advocacy. And advocacy can be defined in a couple of ways. The most common way is those who are advocating for a brand or spreading word of mouth for a brand. And the mantra here is, in great advocacy, is you have to make it easy for people to care and easy for people to share. But advocacy is also related to moving people along the decision journey. And there's different ways that you interact with people depending upon where they are on the decision journey. We haven't seen evidence that a lot of brands are there yet, but we saw a lot of improvement in the way that brands are interacting with their members and their customers around word of mouth and around advocating for the brand. They're giving them a lot of great content to share inside their communities. They're giving them good prompts on how to share that. And they're adopting a lot of really great best practices. So there was a high adoption rate on rich media, which in an advocacy mode is a shareable asset. This is snackable. It's easy to pass along to people. Share features, it's high at 78%, but seriously, in this day and age, where are those other 22%? Why don't they make it easy for people to share, inside of their community? That was eye-opening to us. But again, people inside of a community want to interact with each other, and only about half of these communities have great social networking functionality within the community, which, again, truncates that peer-to-peer experience. That's why I'm going to a community. I want a relationship with the brand, but I also want a relationship with the other community members. Again, this next one just absolutely baffles me. There's only 47% with a active community manager front and center. This is the face of the brand. This is what personalizes the brand to the community members, and yet it's like just a website with no personality when you don't have a community manager there. So we think that would take people to the next level if they had a more personalized experience there. Offline engagement, we looked for the integration of real-world and virtual experiences within the community. So cueing people that we have these great events going on in your area is part of that localization, personalization. There's not a lot of brands doing it, about a third of them. Again, rewards and recognition, that's important for every pillar of community. User reviews, again, very important. We talked about that before. And then an advocate or expert program. If you're trying to get people to spread word of mouth, that 6 to 8% of your customer group are going to be the hand raisers. They're going to be the ones that step forward. And yet we saw only about 10%, about 16% of the communities that were advocacy communities that even had anything of an advocate base there, that were front and center. Nothing to recruit, no little private, behind the velvet ropes, little room for the advocates, which is a big miss. A brand that does a good job, though, is Home Depot. They've changed their approach over the last couple of years. I'm a gardener. I buy all my plants at Home Depot, and their community now is making it easier for me to plan, to learn new things that I can do, to talk to experts. They're still lacking the ability to talk to each other, although there's the start of a little bit of evidence of that, where there's some user-generated videos that they show. But again, this is what I would call an instructional community. It has a lot of great how-to content, and that drives further engagement. It does localize the content by my planting zone, which is very important to people that garden. And then it helps me search for plants, what's available. I do not believe that they have yet started to allow you to build a shopping list. If I was on the phone with Home Depot, that's what I would tell them. Let me do that. Let me send it to my mobile device and let me just access it there. Send me some coupons that I can just access from my mobile device. The extension of community to the mobile device is just lacking at this point, and that's a big opportunity for people who want to leap ahead when that makes sense. But the thing some of the other things that I liked here was they have expert bloggers, which a lot of communities have that as part of their content mix. But they give me a lot of ways to interact with those bloggers and to get to know who they are, which to me is very important. I can also join a garden club, and it quickly shows me what all of the benefits are of joining that club. And then once I join it, I get a lot of other content from them that I wouldn't get unless I did join that. So there's a lot of organizational structure here that Home Depot did around a very specific interest. And I believe that one of their strategies is to do this around other interests as they go. And I was happy to see this because they made great strides, as I say, from the year before. The last pillar of engagement is feedback. And again, feedback is getting people to give the brand ideas. This is the co-creation engine. It's a higher form of engagement. And the best practices here are very simple and common sense. If you're asking people to share their ideas, you need to recognize those ideas. You need to show them that the community contributed ideas that the brand is actually acting upon. You need to show them the status of those ideas. You need to be able to bookmark your ideas, which ideas that you have contributed additional threads to. So I've taken this idea X, and with my little twist and tangent, I've turned it into idea Y. It's basically, again, it needs to be very, very interactive. You need to cue people that your ideas are important and we respect the time that you've taken to share this. Very quickly, EA, which is, everybody probably knows is one of the big game manufacturers, and they have this Answer HQ section of their community. And this is a place where I can not only give you ideas about the community, but there's separate forums where I can give you ideas for the games that I'm very passionate about. So I can give you ideas for where to take a particular character, where I'd like to see the next battle being raged, all of these things. So there's, best practices here in that, you have to cue the community that here are some of the latest ideas. Again, as I mentioned before, here are completed ideas. Show that there's been movement. And then here's that idea status. They do everything right here, and the platform makes it easy for them to do that. So I'm going to wind up with just a couple of more thoughts here. We started out by saying that the community ecosystem extends, beyond just the branded website or the branded community structure to include a whole social ecosystem. It's just the way people engage, and you want to provide appropriate engagement for how people engage across these different platforms. So we look at the integration of the community with social channels and with mobile, and we found this pretty interesting. On the left are a couple of brands that we think do a particularly good job. Mountain Dew has got a tremendous amount of integration for their crowdsourcing model. They crowdsource flavors that they want people to bring back. They crowdsource the creation of commercials, advertisements, a lot of stuff where they involve the community. And they do this both on their online community, and then they'll develop like a Facebook page just for the crowdsourcing of the Lil Wayne commercial, for example. Or they'll create a social platform for their campaign to bring back flavors that they've sunsetted in the past. So they do a really interesting thing. We thought they were one of the brands that integrated with social media very well. Sprint, AT&T, and Verizon, again, they're all in that telecommunications industry, so they all do a really good job of featuring Twitter streams within their support communities. They invite customers to jump onto the Twitter stream and answer people's questions, to tweet back people's questions. It's starting to become the norm within that social customer care, being integrated right back to the support community. Sprint basically integrates their online support community within their Facebook page, which is really good. And then Coke, they actually developed a fairly sophisticated model for Facebook, and with a variety of different tabs, have created a faux community platform, which can be good and bad. I'm sure, as Joe would tell you, you don't really have control over that platform, and you don't have access to a lot of the the back-end data that you would get with Lithium, for example. Lithium analytics are very good. So here are some of those examples graphically that I talked about. The upper right is the Lil Wayne commercial. And the Coke Facebook and the Sprint Facebook community page where they integrate support. So this is something that you can look at a little bit more closely if you download the study. The final point is what I just mentioned. The mobile integration with community is almost non-existent. It's not that the brands that we looked at for the study don't have mobile apps. They do, many of them, but they don't have a mobile community app. They're not making it easy to bring the community experience to the handset, which to me is a big miss. And they're not really, bringing a great community experience. There should be an app for the tablet too, and they're just not doing it. Some of them are, but not all of them are. A couple exceptions. Special K does a really great job of allowing you to go into the community and, develop a whole plan for a healthy lifestyle, and then send, your shopping lists, your fitness regimen, all of that right to your phone so that you can take it with you, so that you can look things up, and so that it's interactive back and forth. Betty Crocker does something similar. From the handset, you can access recipes that you've saved on the community. You can search for recipes based on ingredients right from your phone. So if I'm in the grocery store, I can put in 3 ingredients, and they'll give me a recipe that I can get. And then I can also get coupons at the point of sale with my handheld, and this is all integrative and interactive back and forth between community and the mobile experience. Merck and Pfizer, both big pharmaceutical companies. You don't hear a lot of the pharmaceutical companies and those in the healthcare industry as being in the best practices area, but they both offer apps that allow you to help manage a disease state, which seems like a no-brainer, but it goes back to, again, to the online community where I can get deeper, richer content that's a little bit more difficult for me to interact with on the phone, on the mobile device, but that I can get putting in what I've eaten if I'm trying to control my cholesterol, things like that, and it tells me what else I'm going to have to do that day. And Sears does a really good job of integrating desktop to pad to mobile, a shopping experience, which is called Shop Your Way. And Sears has a really great integrated community social shop experience. And here's just some, again, graphic examples of that. So that's my story, guys. I'm going to turn it back to Joe. I think we just have a few minutes for questions. So, Joe?
All right, Kathy, thanks very much. And, the great thing is the last few slides you did covered 3 of the questions that we got from the audience. So you did them in more detail than I think we would have had the chance to in the Q&A. But we do have a couple minutes, and there are some, I think, really interesting questions we got in from the audience. I'm going to start with one of the worst practices. One of the worst practices you named is leaving outdated content in the community. And I feel the same way, campaigns that have ended, promotions that are old. One of my favorites is the welcome message for the community, which is often the first thing that people see, is 2 or 3 years old, that the date hasn't been updated. And I think most of our customers understand that. Most of them do a really good job. But let me ask you a slightly tougher question about that. Communities are getting more mature, right? So they're not just a year or 2 years old anymore. They're 3, 4, 5. The question we're hearing starting to bubble up here is about archiving content. And it's kind of a tough one, right? Because the long tail, and you've got people who do have a need for that old content. But I think it's a legitimate question, What are you seeing people doing with archiving practices? Are they literally going into their community and, quote, cleaning out, content, conversations that took place, 3 years ago?
Yeah, it is a really good question, and it is a conundrum. So the best practice that I've seen in that arena is all tied in with sophisticated personalization, right? So if I've tagged that content and pulled it into my personal dashboard, I can keep that content there. Basically, you know, if you talk about archiving as actually taking it off the site and hosting it someplace else, as opposed to tabbing it like you would do on a blog roll, and you would see archive blogs by date or topic or whatever. You're not necessarily seeing that as current content, but I can easily get to that content. So I think a combination of tabbing and identifying that content, keeping it available to community members, allowing them to bring it into their dashboard so that they can easily find the content that's their favorite is the best. And the other approach, Joe, that I've seen is, again, using the crowdsourcing model and find out, you know, we're going to be archiving, you know, XYZ content. We're only going to keep the content that has been the most highly rated in the past. And if there's content that you want to see us saved, you know, make an appeal for it, that kind of a thing. So I don't like to see content go totally away. But on the other hand, I don't want it to be the only content that I see is this old, outdated content.
Well, I think you're confirming. Complicated question. And you know, your point about personalization, I think, is really good in personal dashboards. You know, personalization is sort of where mobile was 5 years ago. It was always going to be here, but it never quite got here. Right. Now mobile is here. I was kind of encouraged to see, you know, more than half of our customers have our mobile solution enabled. And that's an old figure. That's probably 6 months old. So I bet we're north of 70% today with mobile. So it's great to see that they're further ahead than I think other folks are. But mobile is definitely there today for our customers. And I think the personalization, I think, is going to get there too. But it's one of those things today that more people talk about than do it.
I agree, both on the community side and the content side.
Got it. And I see we've got about 1 more minute here. Bonnie, do we have an opportunity for one more question?
I think we can go for one more question, Joe. Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So a question about rewards and recognition and advocacy. One of the attendees asked the question, kind of what's the difference? Are we talking about different things when we talk about advocacy or just having a rewards and recognition program?
Yes, they're two very different things. So advocates, the people who are the, your highest performers, those, again, by definition, the people in your customer base that have that deepest affinity for you. You need to find them and engage them differently than other people, and of course, just finding them and engaging them a little differently than the other people is a form of recognition, but it doesn't take away the fact that you need to have rewards and recognition for all of your community members, whether they're advocates or not. Often, one of the best practices for engaging your advocates is to have a private space in the community, give them sneak peeks of things before the community at large sees that, have them in on, as hand raisers, doing some product testing. A lot of times people will invite their advocates into a private feedback community so that they really do feel this, that they're an important part of the brand team there. But rewards and recognition should also be across your whole community. So if I'm a community member and I'm contributing content, I'm sharing content, I'm recruiting other people to the community, sharing, all of that stuff, there should be an engine, a gamification engine behind there that's, quietly giving me points. And then I'm showing up on a leaderboard, and I may be badged for this, or I may have the rewards may be a surprise and delight. It's not monetary nature. It may be that there's premium content that the most highly kudoed people within the community get, things like that. It's more intrinsic value than extrinsic value in the reward structure. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, thanks. I think that was helpful. A part of the advocacy program, but different things.
Yes.
All right. I think we're right there. A little bit after the top of the hour, we're going to have to close off for the day. Thank you so much. The Twitter stream and the questions were just more than we could get to, but thanks for all of those who did contribute. The two biggest questions are, how do I get the slides? They are available through the resources section in your event console for download. The other question was, how do I get the report? And if you just simply search on ComBlu, C-O-M-B-L-U, on State of Online Communities 2012, you should find it straight away. That's how we found it. We tweeted that out earlier. Thanks again for all who joined us, and look forward to seeing you on the next webcast.